Leaving the battlefield doesn't mean the war is over. Sometimes the silence is worse than gunfire, because the silence is where the past waits. Ethan Cole thought he'd found a safe zone after his own family erased him in a will reading. Then a sealed letter showed up outside the elevator like a breach in his life. A key. A mansion on a bluff in Kingsford Bay. A blizzard that swallowed the road. And the moment Ethan stepped inside, there were Chuge, fresh footprints in the dust, a hidden vault, a fortune he never asked for. Then the people who wrote him off came back with lawyers and threats, trying to freeze everything and take it by force of paperwork.
You have nowhere left to run.
So answer me straight, Brotherhood. When you're backed into a corner, do you run or do you fight? Do you hold the line? Or do you leave the safe zone and become the protector? Sit down. Stay with me. Hear the whole thing, not to chase money, but to learn how a man survives when the ghosts of the past come knocking. The will that left him nothing. Lake effect sleet swept across downtown Chicago, turning sidewalks into glass. Wind tunneled between towers and rattled the bare branches like bones, the kind of cold that found old injuries and made them speak. Ethan Cole moved through the lobby of Price and Halstead with a stiffness he tried to hide. His left knee always complained in weather like this. He was 45, tall and broad-shouldered, built like a man who once carried heavier things than tool bags. The navy winter coat he wore fell to mid-thigh, damp at the hem. Under it, a red and black plaid flannel showed at the collar. Faded jeans, brown leather boots scuffed by work and miles. Beside him, Ryder matched his pace without pulling. The German Shepherd was 5 years old, black along the back with tan on the legs and face, ears upright, amber-brown eyes tracking everything. A black service harness sat snug on the dog's frame. The bold patch clear enough to read without leaning in. Service dog. Do not pet. Ryder did not bark. He did not need to. The dog's quiet attention made a small boundary around Ethan, a space the world tended to respect. Ethan hated needing that boundary. The receptionist looked up, gave Ryder a quick, uncertain smile, then glanced away as if the dog's steadiness felt like judgment. "Mr. Cole, they're ready." A mahogany-paneled conference room waited on the other side of a glass door. Warm light, polished wood, soft leather chairs that probably cost more than Ethan's pickup. He smelled coffee and expensive cologne and something older, something like power that had been sitting in a room too long. Grant Cole rose first when Ethan entered. Grant was 35, slim where Ethan was solid, hair dark and perfectly styled. His suit fit like it had been tailored to his ambition. His eyes held the clean chill of winter steel, and his smile never quite reached them. Vivian sat with her legs crossed, 41 and flawlessly assembled. Her hair was smoothed into glossy waves, makeup sharp, jewelry catching the light in small flashes. She didn't look at Ethan right away. She looked at Ryder, then at the harness, as if even that offended her. Ethan took the chair farthest from them. Ryder settled at his left boot, head up, calm as a sentry. The attorney, a thin man named Martin Hale, with a careful voice and careful hands, cleared his throat and opened a folder. He spoke about Eleanor Cole in the way people spoke about money when it had been alive long enough to become its own person. Legacy, estates, responsibilities. Ethan kept his gaze on the grain of the table. He told himself he was here only to finish it, to hear the final words of a woman who had loved her standards more than her grandson. He tried not to remember the last time he'd seen his grandmother. Her perfume, her silence, the way she had looked through him as if he were a smudge on a window. Hale began reading. To my granddaughter Vivian Cole, I leave the Cole Ridge portfolio holdings and the property on North Pine Street. Vivian's mouth curved, satisfied. Not loud, not greedy, just certain. To my grandson Grant Cole, I leave controlling interest in Cole Ridge Partners and the lakeside residence in Wilmette. Grant nodded once, like a man accepting his due. Ethan watched him and felt something old rise in his chest. Not envy exactly. More like the ache of being measured and found unworthy for reasons no one would ever say out loud. Even distant names were spoken. Cousins, an aunt, a nephew he barely remembered from childhood. A few thousand here, a sentimental item there. The family tree was being watered with wealth. Ethan sat very still. He could feel Ryder's breathing. In, out. In, out. A metronome of loyalty. And to my grandson, Ethan Cole, Hale said, and the room seemed to sharpen around that sentence. I leave nothing. The words landed soft and final. No pause for explanation, no apology hidden in legal language. Just nothing. Ethan didn't blink. He felt the heat climb up his neck anyway, the stubborn flare of humiliation he'd sworn he wouldn't give them. He thought of his hands, rough from work, calloused from wrenches and winter. Thought of the furnace job he'd done last week for an elderly couple who tried to pay him with casseroles because their check hadn't cleared. Thought of the nights he woke up sweating, jaw clenched, fighting a memory with no enemy he could see. He had served. He had bled. He had kept his head down when the world demanded a show. He had tried to live clean. Nothing. Grant leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under a man who had never been afraid of silence. Well, he said, voice smooth. That settles it. Vivian let out a small laugh, like a crystal glass tapped with a spoon. Ethan stood. His knee tugged, stiff and sore, but he didn't let it show. He rested one hand on the table for a fraction of a second, then straightened. Ethan, Grant said, sweet as poison. If you need help, I can float you alone. We can discuss terms. Adults do that. Paperwork, interest, that sort of thing. Ethan looked at his brother. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. We never needed you, he said. It wasn't fully true. Grant knew it. Vivian knew it. Ethan knew it most of all. But the sentence tasted like air after being underwater too long. Ryder rose with him, a silent shadow. They were almost to the elevator when a woman hurried down the hall, heels clicking fast against marble. She was in her 50s, hair gray-blonde pulled into a bun, a folder clutched to her chest. Her face held the tired urgency of someone who had carried a secret too long. Mr. Cole, she called, breath catching. Please, wait. Ethan stopped. Ryder's ears tilted forward, alert but still quiet. I'm Patricia Walsh, the woman said, and offered a hand that trembled slightly. I represent another estate that concerns you. Grant's voice cut in from behind, amused. Another estate, really? Ethan collects disappointments now. Patricia ignored him with practiced focus. This is from Martha Wainwright, she said to Ethan, as if the name should mean something important. She passed away 6 weeks ago. She left specific instructions that this be delivered after your grandmother's will was read. The name stirred a faint memory, like a photograph seen once and then tucked away. Someone older, someone cut off, someone never spoken of at family dinners. Patricia slid an envelope into Ethan's hand. Cream paper, elegant script. Ethan Cole,
written as if the writer wanted the name to survive. Ethan stared at it. His thumb traced the seal.
For a moment, he felt the weight of the conference room fall away, replaced by something stranger. Not hope yet, but the shape of a door. He looked at Ryder. The dog's amber eyes held steady, as if saying, "Here, this is the next step." Ethan turned the envelope over once, then again, breathing in slowly through his nose. Behind him, Grant scoffed. Vivian's jewelry chimed softly as she shifted. Ethan didn't move toward them. He moved toward the elevator, letter in hand, Ryder at his side. And whatever waited inside that sealed paper, pulling at the future like a tide. Ashwood Bluff, in a whiteout. By midnight, Chicago's sleet had turned to heavy snow. The wind shoved at Ethan's truck like an angry hand, and the highway lights blurred into pale smears, warning him that winter was not in the mood to negotiate. Ethan Cole kept both hands on the wheel and his jaw set. 45 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, he carried himself like a man who had once been trained to stay calm in chaos. Tonight, calm was something he had to build on purpose, brick by brick, because the letter on the passenger seat felt like a live wire. He wore the same clothes he'd worn to the law office, because he didn't own many good outfits, and because he didn't believe in costumes. Navy winter coat, thigh length, heavy with road salt at the hem. Red and black plaid flannel underneath. Faded jeans. Brown leather boots pressing the pedals with steady force. Ryder sat in the passenger seat, upright and quiet. The German shepherd's black and tan coat looked almost painted in the passing lights, his ears rigid, his amber-brown eyes tracking the dark beyond the windshield. A black service harness lay snug against his chest, the patch clear even in the dim cabin glow. Service dog, do not pet. Ryder didn't need to bark to say he was paying attention. He was attention. Ethan glanced at the envelope again, then forced his eyes back to the road. After the elevator ride down from that polished building, he'd opened the letter in the shelter of his truck, hands stiff from cold and from the sting of being erased. The handwriting had been firm, the words plain. Martha Wainwright, Kingsford Bay, Michigan. A house called Ashwood Bluff Manor. And one line that would not leave him alone. When the house is silent, follow the place where vows were broken, not where they were made. It felt like a riddle. It felt like a warning. It felt like an invitation to a life he did not deserve, which made it hard to trust. He should have stayed in Chicago, gone back to work, pretended his family's contempt was just weather, something you could shrug off with enough layers. But he couldn't unhear the lawyer's voice saying nothing. He couldn't unfeel the way Grant's smile had sharpened when he offered that loan, like a hand reaching out only to yank him down. Martha's letter had done something strange. It had named him. It had seen him. Not as a liability, not as a failure, not as an embarrassment at a conference table. As a person. By the time he crossed into Michigan, the snow thickened. The sky was a low gray lid pressed down on the world. His headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the storm, and beyond that, everything was erased. A gas station appeared like a small miracle, its sign buzzing. Ethan pulled in, tires crunching over ice. The cold slapped him the second he opened the door. Inside, heat and stale coffee hit his face. A clerk behind the counter watched Ethan with the careful curiosity people reserved for strangers in bad weather. Then the clerk's eyes flicked to Ryder's harness and softened a little, like the dog was a badge that said Ethan had rules. Ethan bought water, jerky, and a cheap flashlight. His card went through on the second try, and he exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for a week. Back in the truck, he drove on. The road narrowed after Kingsford Bay's last lit intersection. Trees leaned toward the lanes, dark and skeletal. Snow piled in drifts. The GPS voice sounded less confident with every turn, as if it, too, wanted him to reconsider. Then it guided him onto a private drive that didn't look like a road anymore, just a white corridor between shadowed branches. His tires slid once. His injured knee twinged when he corrected the wheel, a quick flare of pain that pulled an old memory to the surface. Sand. Smoke. A shouted order, the weight of a body he had refused to leave behind. Ethan breathed out slowly until the past loosened its grip. Easy, he murmured, not sure if he was talking to the truck, the storm, or himself. Ryder's eyes stayed forward, steady. A quiet vote of confidence. The mansion rose out of the whiteout like something that had been waiting. Stone and timber, tall and dark, with a wraparound balcony and windows that stared back like blank eyes. Snow clung to the roof lines and softened the sharp edges, but it couldn't hide the size of it or the feeling that it belonged to another century. Ethan parked as close as he could. The engine ticked as it cooled, a small sound in a huge silence. He held the key Patricia Walsh had given him, the metal cold enough to bite. The lock turned with a solid click. The oak door groaned open, and wind shoved snow into the entrance hall like it was trying to follow them inside. Ethan stepped into darkness that smelled of old wood, dust, and time. His flashlight beam shook slightly as he moved. Not from fear exactly, but from the awareness that his life had just crossed a line he might not be able to uncross. The entryway was grand. A sweeping staircase, a carved banister, chandeliers hanging from a high ceiling like frozen stars. Everything was draped in dust sheets, ghostly shapes in the cone of light. It was colder inside than out. Ethan's breath fogged in front of him. He rubbed his hands together and felt the calluses, the proof of every job that kept him afloat. He wasn't built for this place. He was built for crawl spaces and boiler rooms, for fixing what broke so other people could sleep. Ryder padded forward and stopped, nose lifted. Not tense, not relaxed. Reading the air. Ethan found a side door that led to a kitchen. The cabinets were stocked, not fresh but thoughtful. Canned goods, dried pasta, rice. Someone had planned for someone to arrive. Martha. He carried blankets upstairs and chose the smallest bedroom. A corner room with a 4-poster bed and tall windows that looked out on a world that had turned entirely white. He laid blankets over the mattress, then more on top, building a nest against the cold. Ryder circled once and sat near the door, as if that position was non-negotiable. Ethan kept the flashlight close, battery already dropping. No charger, no signal out here. Just the storm and the house and the letter that had brought him to both. He tried to sleep. He tried to let the luxury of the room soothe him. Instead, his mind replayed the law office, the word nothing, the way Vivian's eyes had skimmed over him like he was a stain. He had faced gunfire without shaking like this, but being rejected by your own blood was a quieter kind of violence. It didn't leave scars you could point to. It left questions that ate from the inside. Sometime after 2 a.m, Ryder's head lifted. Ethan's eyes snapped open. The dog didn't bark. He didn't growl. He didn't move toward the door. He just listened, ears forward, body still. Ethan listened too. A sound drifted up from the floor below. Footsteps. Soft. Deliberate. Not the house settling, not pipes, not wind. A person walking through rooms that should have been empty. Ethan sat up slowly, heart tight in his chest. His hand found the flashlight, then the cheap tool knife in his pocket, as if metal could protect him from whatever waited in the dark. Ryder looked at him once, then back at the door. Ready. Ethan swung his legs off the bed. His knee complained. He ignored it. He told himself it could be a caretaker, a neighbor, someone checking the property. But the footsteps kept moving, unhurried, like they belonged here. Ethan stood, the navy coat pulling around his shoulders, the red and black flannel visible as he breathed in. He opened the bedroom door a crack. The hallway was a long throat of darkness, and from somewhere downstairs, a floorboard creaked again, answering him like the house had been waiting to speak. Footprints in the dust. Dawn came slow over Kingsford Bay, a thin gray light spilling across the snow. Overnight wind had buried the driveway again, as if the storm wanted to erase the fact that Ethan Cole had arrived at all. Ethan did not sleep. He sat on the edge of the four-poster bed, navy coat still on, red and black plaid flannel showing at the collar. His faded jeans were stiff with cold. The brown leather boots stayed laced, ready. He told himself it was practical. The truth was simpler. He did not trust the house yet. Ryder stayed by the bedroom door, a steady presence. The German shepherd's black service harness lay snug on his chest, the patch blunt and clear. The dog did not bark. He only listened, ears pricked, amber-brown eyes fixed on the hallway like it was a living thing. When the footsteps came again, they were softer than before, measured, like someone walking without fear of being heard. Ethan's heart tightened. Not panic, not exactly. More like the old instinct that woke up in the desert before the first shot. He lifted his flashlight and eased the door open. The hallway was a tunnel of shadow. His beam touched framed paintings wrapped in dust sheets, then the carved banister, then the stairwell sinking into darkness. Ryder moved first, silent paws on wood. Ethan followed, left knee stiff, forcing his gait to stay controlled. The house groaned under him anyway, every step a confession. At the bottom of the stairs, moonlight still pooled faintly on marble. The front door was closed. No wind, no loose latch. Ethan swept the flashlight across the floor. His breath caught. Fresh footprints pressed into the dust. Not his, not Ryder's. Too wide, too deep, the tread sharp as a new stamp. They led away from the entry hall, straight toward a tall door half hidden behind a curtain. The library. Ethan stood very still. He tried to make his mind list reasonable explanations. A caretaker, a neighbor checking the property, a local kid daring a friend. But the prints looked too calm for that. Whoever made them had not been running. They had been walking as if the house belonged to them. Ryder stopped at Ethan's side, body steady, head angled forward. No growl, no noise, just a quiet warning in his posture. Ethan pushed the library door open. The smell hit him first. Old leather, aged paper, dust warmed by wood. The flashlight beam cut through rows of shelves and landed on a small table beside a wingback chair. A book lay open there, as if someone had been reading and stepped away for a moment. Not a book, a journal. Ethan moved closer, each step slow, deliberate. He did not like rooms that felt staged. In his old life, staged rooms were traps. The handwriting on the open page matched the letter. Firm, neat, a little slanted. Martha Wainwright. The entry was dated 5 months ago. Ethan read without meaning to. His eyes took the words like oxygen. Martha wrote about time running out, about doctors and weeks, about how Ashwood Bluff had been her fortress when the world tried to grind her down. She wrote about watching Ethan from a distance, not out of pity, but recognition. She wrote one sentence that landed in his chest like a weight and a blessing at the same time. He is stronger than the people who shamed him. Ethan's throat tightened. He hated that it mattered. He hated that a stranger's belief could reach deeper than his own. A faint sound drifted through the library. Not a creak, not wind. A whisper, so light he thought he imagined it. "Welcome home." Ethan spun, flashlight cutting wild arcs across shelves and corners. Nothing moved. The room was still. The house held its breath. Ryder stepped forward one pace, eyes locked on the darkness beyond the doorway, like he heard something Ethan could not. Ethan backed away from the journal. He did not slam it shut. He did not touch anything else. He retreated the way he had been trained to retreat, controlled and fast, keeping his body between danger and the dog that had already saved him once in another life. Upstairs, he locked the bedroom door, shoved a chair under the handle, and sat on the floor with his back to the bed until the first dull light seeped through the curtains. Morning did not erase what happened. It only changed the shape of the fear. In daylight, the mansion looked less like a threat and more like a sleeping giant. Still cold, still silent, still watching. Ethan made himself move. He needed supplies, a charger, answers that did not come from shadows. He clipped Ryder's leash and stepped outside. Snow bit his face. The driveway was a white wall again. He dug his truck out for almost an hour, breath steaming, knee aching. He did not complain. Complaining never fixed anything. Ryder stood nearby, scanning the trees and the road like a guard on a perimeter. Kingsford Bay was small, tucked against the lake like it wanted to hide. The diner near the main road had a glowing open sign and fogged windows. Ethan parked and hesitated before going in. He looked like trouble. He knew that. Big man, tired eyes, service dog. A stranger with a storm in his wake. Inside, warmth wrapped around him. Coffee smell, fried potatoes, the soft clatter of plates. A few heads turned, then turned away. Behind the counter, a woman in her late 30s moved with the controlled speed of someone used to emergencies. She had chestnut brown hair pulled into a low bun, a few strands loose like she had stopped fighting them. Her face was bright, but not soft, the kind of strength that came from showing up to hard things anyway. Her eyes, a muted green-gray, assessed Ethan without fear. Then she noticed Ryder's harness. Her gaze softened. "You're from the house on the bluff," she said, not a question. Ethan blinked. "How do you know?" "Everyone knows when a new truck shows up in a storm." Her voice was calm, grounded. "I'm Claire Bennett." She reached for a mug, poured coffee, and slid it across the counter like she had decided he needed it. Her hands had small marks on the knuckles, the kind that came from long shifts and quick work. Ethan stayed standing. "Ethan Cole." Claire nodded once, like the name meant something to her. "Martha Wainwright's place," she said. "She used to help the clinic, quietly. She paid bills for people who were too proud to ask." Ethan felt the word quietly catch in him. It fit with the journal, with the stocked pantry, with the way the house felt prepared. "I didn't know her," he admitted. Claire's mouth lifted in a small, honest smile. She didn't need to be known. That was her whole thing. Ethan should have told her he was fine. He should have taken his coffee and left. Instead, his exhaustion slipped out through a crack. "I heard someone inside last night," he said, low enough that only she could hear. Claire did not laugh. She did not dismiss him. Her eyes sharpened, not into fear, but focus. Footsteps, she guessed. Ethan's shoulders tightened. And prints. Claire set a hand flat on the counter. If that's real, you don't stay alone out there. Not in this weather. Not in an old place with too many corners. She tore a page from a small notepad and wrote quickly. Names, numbers, a hardware store owner, a generator guy, the sheriff's office. Then she paused, pen hovering. And if you need a friend who won't ask questions you're not ready to answer, she said, you can call me too. Ethan stared at the paper. No one in Chicago offered help like that without a hook in it. Here, it was offered like a coat in the cold. He took the note. His fingers brushed hers. Warm. Real. He hated how much it mattered. Back at Ashwood Bluff, Ethan stepped into the entry hall and felt the silence settle again. He looked up at the high ceiling, the chandeliers, the staircase. Okay, he whispered, not to the house, but to himself. Show me what you want. Ryder walked forward and stopped at the base of the stairs. Then, without hesitation, the dog turned his head toward a section of wall where a portrait hung slightly crooked. Ryder's ears lifted. He stared at that spot like it was calling his name. Ethan moved closer, pulse ticking faster, and reached for the edge of the frame. The portrait shifted under his hand. And somewhere behind the wall, wood knocked hollow. The room Martha hid. Snow kept falling in slow, stubborn sheets, muffling Kingsford Bay until the world felt wrapped in cotton. The mansion's windows glowed with pale daylight, and every sound inside seemed louder than it should have been. Ethan Cole stood at the base of the stairs, still wearing the same fixed armor of his life. A thigh-length navy winter coat over a red and black plaid flannel, faded jeans, brown leather boots worn at the toes. His left knee tightened as he shifted his weight, a familiar reminder that some wounds never truly left. Ryder waited beside him, steady and silent. The German shepherd's black and tan coat looked darker against the mansion's dust-pale floors. A black service harness sat snug across his chest, the patch plain and blunt. Ryder's amber-brown eyes stayed on Ethan's hands, then on the wall ahead, as if tracking the next move before Ethan made it. The portrait hung slightly crooked, just like Ryder had indicated. A stern woman's face stared out from the canvas, painted in muted tones that made her eyes look almost alive. Ethan slid his fingers under the frame and lifted. The wall behind it did not feel like solid plaster. It felt like a lie. He pressed his palm flat and listened. One quick knock, then another. Hollow. A slow breath moved through his chest. He had been trained to read rooms, trained to find what people tried to hide. Still, a part of him resisted believing this house was actually meant for him. The thought was too big, too clean, too undeserved. He pushed. A panel shifted with a reluctant scrape, and a narrow opening appeared, dark and cramped. Cold air breathed out from inside, carrying the scent of old wood and something faintly metallic. Ryder stepped forward first, not rushing, not hesitant, just certain. Ethan followed into the passage, shoulders brushing the walls. The stairwell climbed tight and steep, hidden inside the mansion like a secret spine. His flashlight beam shook once when his knee caught on a step, but he steadied it and kept moving. At the top, the passage opened into a room filled with winter light. An artist's studio. Skylights overhead poured a pale glow across canvases stacked along the walls. Jars of dried brushes stood like little forests on a work table. Sketchbooks lay open, pages crowded with quick strokes, notes, and numbers. Ethan's breath caught when he saw the central easel. A painting of Ashwood Bluff in summer, all green trees and warm sun, the mansion softened into something almost welcoming. But it was the figure on the porch that pinned him in place. A man in a navy coat over a red and black flannel, broad shoulders turned slightly as if listening, a German shepherd beside him. It was him. Not exact in every line, but close enough to feel like the room had reached into his future and pulled something back. Ethan took one careful step closer, as if he might disturb the air and wake the painting. Ryder's ears lifted. The dog stared at the canvas, then at the surrounding studio, scanning like he could smell the truth. Ethan's gaze dropped to a small card propped against a stack of sketchbooks. 2 words written in firm script. Not prophecy. Preparation. His throat tightened. He didn't know why it hit so hard, only that it did. Being seen was one thing. Being planned for was another. It made his chest ache in a place he usually kept locked. On the work table, a framed poem hung beside 4 numbers written in a different hand, as if someone had copied them for safety. Beneath it was a line that echoed the letter he could not forget. Follow the place where vows were broken, not where they were made. Ethan looked around, forcing his mind into a calm inventory. Files in drawers, labels on boxes. A stack of documents tied with ribbon, each bundle dated. He found a small cabinet with folders arranged by year, each one marked with a brief phrase. A marriage, a purchase, a court decree, a life measured in turning points. He read until the pattern became clear. The numbers were not meant to be placed in order of time. They were meant to be placed in order of meaning, in order of freedom. Ethan's hands began to tremble, not from cold now, from the sudden sense that Martha Wainwright had built a trail through her own history and left it for him, like a rope bridge across a canyon. He found the second hidden door behind a tall storage shelf. It opened into another staircase, broader than the first, leading up and forward into a long 3rd-floor corridor that felt newer, cleaner. The air changed too, less dust, more controlled, like someone had cared about this space. At the end of the hall, a heavy door waited. Ethan put his shoulder into it. It opened with a reluctant sigh. A vault. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, labeled with decades. Glass cases held jewelry and coins. A steel safe dominated the far side, built into the wall like it had grown there. Its face was dull green, with brass fixtures that caught the skylight in sharp points. Ethan stepped closer, hearing only his own breathing and the soft shift of Ryder's paws. He turned the dial slowly, using the numbers he had arranged by what mattered most to Martha. The clicks sounded too loud, like the house was counting along. When the final number slid into place, the safe gave a quiet, decisive clunk. The door swung open. For a moment, Ethan simply stared, unable to make his mind accept what his eyes were seeing. Stacks of bearer bonds, stock certificates, deeds, art wrapped in protective cloth, a leather box with an inventory sheet written in that same firm script, a fortune large enough to bend reality. Ethan's stomach dropped, not with greed, but with fear. Money like this did not sit quietly in the world. It drew eyes. It drew hands. It drew bloodless wars fought with lawyers and signatures. He barely had time to exhale before Ryder's head snapped toward the window. A low engine rumble cut through the muffled snow. Tires on a buried drive. Ethan moved to the dormer and looked down. A black SUV crawled toward the house, expensive and wrong against the white. Grant and Vivian. And beside them, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, thin-framed glasses, and a face that looked practiced at winning. He wore a dark suit like a uniform and held a leather briefcase close to his body, as if it contained authority. Nolan Price, Ethan thought, though he had never met him. The kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to hurt someone without raising your voice. They were inside minutes later, moving through the mansion like they belonged there. Ethan stepped out of the vault room and planted himself between them and the open safe. His navy coat hung heavy over his flannel, and he felt the old sail steadiness settle into his bones. The part of him that did not flinch when a threat walked into the room. Ryder stood at his side, silent, alert, unblinking. Grant's smile was all teeth. "Well," he said, glancing past Ethan into the vault, "look what our brother found." Vivian's eyes glittered as they swept the shelves. "Family has such interesting surprises." Nolan Price stepped forward with calm precision. "Mr. Cole, there has been a misunderstanding. Mrs. Wainwright's will is being contested. Until the matter is resolved, the assets will be considered at risk. Steps will be taken to freeze access." Ethan's voice came out low. "This is my house." Vivian let out a small laugh. "Your house? Ethan, you fix furnaces. You don't own mansions." Grant leaned in, voice soft as a blade sliding free. "Sign your claim over to us. We'll give you 50 grand. More money than you've ever had at once." Ethan looked at them. Really looked. Two people raised in the same family, holding the same last name, and still strangers to anything that mattered. He thought of Martha's handwriting. Not prophecy, preparation. He thought of Claire's note, the numbers she had given him, the way she'd spoken like help could be offered without a hook. Then he looked down at Ryder. The dog didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood, a quiet line in the snow. Ethan straightened, shoulders squared, jaw set. "No," he said. Grant's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake." Ethan held his gaze. "It's mine to make." Outside, wind pressed against the glass. Inside, the mansion felt suddenly smaller, like all the air had gathered into a single point. Nolan Price clicked his briefcase shut with deliberate finality. "Then we'll see you in court." Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't over." Ethan didn't move. He didn't step back. He didn't give them the satisfaction of a flinch. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. And as they turned to leave, their footsteps loud and confident on the floorboards, Ethan realized the real fight was not the safe. The real fight was what came next. The will that would not break. March snow drifted across Kingsford Bay like ash from a quiet fire. The courthouse sat solid and old against the white, its stone steps dusted clean by wind, as if winter itself had come to witness. Ethan Cole climbed those steps, with his left knee stiff and aching, but his posture stayed straight. He wore the same clothes he always wore, not for show, but because the world had never offered him another uniform that fit. A thigh-length navy winter coat over a red and black plaid flannel, faded jeans, brown leather boots. Beside him, Ryder moved with silent purpose, the German shepherd's black service harness snug across his chest,
the patch blunt and clear. Ryder's amber-brown eyes scanned the doors, the corners, the people. Ethan told himself he was calm. The truth was, he was tired in a place deeper than muscle. Inside the courthouse, the hallway smelled like old paper and coffee that had sat too long.
Kingsford Bay locals filled the benches. Not loud, not dramatic. They were simply present. It made Ethan's throat tighten, because in Chicago, presence always came with a price. Here, it felt like a choice. Claire Bennett stood near the back wall, coat buttoned, hair pinned into a low bun with a few loose strands escaping like they always did. Her green-gray eyes met Ethan's for a second. No pity, no fear. Just a steady, quiet faith that said he did not have to do this alone. A man stepped out of a side office and approached Ethan with slow confidence. He was around 70, silver-haired, face lined by years and weather, eyes sharp under gentle brows. His suit was old-fashioned, not expensive, but cared for. "Ethan Cole," the man said, voice calm. "Walter Green." His handshake was firm, not a performance. Ethan felt something inside him unclench. "I knew Martha Wainwright," Walter continued. "I witnessed her will. I also know the kind of people who pretend law is a weapon they invented." That made Ethan almost smile. Almost. On the other side of the hall, Grant and Vivian arrived like a storm that thought it owned the sky. Grant's suit was perfect. Vivian's jewelry caught the light in bright flashes that felt like laughter with teeth. Between them walked Nolan Price, their attorney, in a dark suit that looked like it had never seen snow. Salt and pepper hair, thin-framed glasses, a briefcase held close to his chest like a shield. His expression was smooth and practiced, the face of a man who believed winning was the same as being right. Grant's gaze swept over Ethan's coat, his flannel, his boots. It paused on Ryder's harness with a flicker of disgust. "Look at you," Grant murmured, low enough to sound like concern. "You really think you belong in this place?" Ethan did not answer. He looked at the floor, then at the courtroom doors, and reminded himself of one thing Martha's journal had given him. Not riches, not revenge. Permission to stand. The bailiff called the case. Ethan walked in with Ryder at his side, the dog's paws quiet against the polished floor. Judge Helen Markham sat above them, 62 with steel-gray hair pulled back neatly, eyes that missed nothing. Her face held no warmth and no cruelty, only attention, sharp and clean. "Proceed," she said. Nolan Price rose first. His voice was polished, confident, and empty of human texture. He spoke of risk, of undue influence, of a beneficiary who appeared suddenly to claim a fortune. He suggested Ethan was a stranger who had wandered into a miracle and decided to steal it. Ethan listened, jaw tight. Part of him wanted to laugh at the idea that his life had ever included miracles. Another part wanted to stand and shout that he had worked for everything he'd ever touched, that he had earned every breath he took. But Walter Green stood instead, and he did it without hurry. "Your Honor," Walter said, and his voice carried the weight of decades. "Martha Wainwright's will was executed properly. She was of sound mind. She was deliberate. She was exact. She anticipated this challenge, which is why she left sealed documents to be opened only if her will was contested." Nolan's smile didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. Walter held up a manila envelope, sealed and signed. He approached the bench with the careful respect of a man who knew the difference between drama and proof.
Judge Markham studied the seal. Then she nodded. "Open it." The room seemed to inhale. Walter broke the seal and removed a set of papers. Genealogy records, legal filings, and lab-certified results.
He handed copies across, including to Nolan Price, who accepted them with a steady hand that became less steady as he read. Grant's face shifted first, like a mask cracking. Vivian's lips parted slightly, and for the first time, she looked unsure. Walter spoke evenly. "The documents establish a concealed family truth. Ethan Cole is not simply a distant relative. DNA evidence confirms he is Martha Wainwright's biological great-grandson." A ripple moved through the courtroom. A sound that was not a gasp, not quite, but something like the world tilting. Ethan's mind went still. Great-grandson. His whole life he had been treated like an error that should have been erased. Now, in a room full of strangers and enemies, he learned he had been the missing piece of someone else's story. Martha had not left him a mansion because she was generous. She had left it because it was hers to give back. Judge Markham read silently for a long moment. Then she looked over her glasses at Grant and Vivian. "You are contesting a valid will," she said, voice flat. "You have also presented no credible evidence of fraud." Nolan Price began. "Your Honor, No," Judge Markham cut in, and the single word stopped him cold. "This court will not reward entitlement dressed as concern. The contest is denied in its entirety. Martha Wainwright's will stands. Mr. Cole retains full legal ownership of the estate." The gavel came down. A clean sound. A final sound. Grant stared as if he'd been slapped. Vivian's eyes flashed, then dimmed. Nolan gathered his papers with the controlled movements of a man trying not to show that he had lost. Ethan didn't celebrate. He couldn't. His victory felt too heavy, like a door that had been locked for decades finally opened and revealed not treasure, but air. Outside the courtroom, Sheriff Daniel Keller waited near the steps, 48, broad-shouldered, face weathered, eyes watchful. He didn't smile, but his presence was clear. "Any trouble?" the sheriff said to Ethan. "You call." Claire came closer, the cold air reddening her cheeks. She didn't touch Ethan at first. She just stood beside him, as if she was learning the shape of his silence. "What now?" she asked softly. Ethan looked toward the lake, where the wind pushed snow across the frozen surface in long, restless lines. "Now," he said, voice rough, "I figure out how to deserve it." Spring arrived slowly. The mansion warmed room by room, not from luxury, but from work. Ethan fixed what was broken because that was what he knew how to do. He hired locals. He listened more than he spoke. He read Martha's journals at night, learning her loneliness, her courage, her quiet generosity. With Walter's guidance and the town's help, Ethan created the Martha Wainwright Trust. The ground floor of Ashwood Bluff became a community center. The library opened its doors. The old studio became a place for classes, for art, for kids who needed something bigger than their own walls. When Grant and Vivian returned months later, their confidence was gone. They stood on the porch like people who had finally met consequences. Grant's voice was quieter. "We were wrong," he said. "We thought we were entitled to everything." Ethan watched them for a long moment, then surprised himself. He didn't feel triumph. He felt tired. He handed them 2 applications, entry-level jobs with the trust, work that required showing up, listening,
and learning how to be useful. Vivian blinked hard. Why would you do that? Ethan thought of Martha's handwriting. Preparation, not prophecy. Because someone gave me a chance I didn't earn, he said. I'm not wasting it. That evening, snow fell again, light and soft. Ethan stood on the porch in his navy coat, flannel visible at the throat. Ryder lay at his boots, calm, eyes half-lidded. Claire stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Ethan like it was the simplest thing in the world. He took it, and in that small warmth, he felt the mansion become something else. Not a fortress, a home. Sometimes the miracle is not a door swinging open in a storm, or a fortune hidden behind stone walls. Sometimes the miracle is that God keeps a small light burning inside a tired person who has every reason to quit. Ethan did not win because he was lucky. Ethan won because he kept showing up. Ethan kept working, kept loving, kept protecting what was right even when nobody clapped, even when family turned cold. And then, in God's timing, a hand reached back through the years and said, "You were never forgotten." That is how faith often looks in real life. Faith looks like getting up for another shift. Faith looks like staying gentle when the world tries to make someone bitter. Faith looks like choosing to build instead of revenge. And when blessings come, faith looks like using them to lift others, not to prove a point. If someone listening feels invisible, if life has been unfair, if the heart has been tired for too long, remember this. God can change a story in one moment. But God also grows a person through every hard day that came before it. Keep going. Keep praying. Keep doing the next right thing. A new chapter can be closer than it seems. If this story touched the heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Comment the part that moved you most, and subscribe for more stories. May God bless you and keep you safe, today and always.